All right, well, welcome everyone to the Remnant of Israel channel here on YouTube. We've finally found enough time to get us another video going. Hope you've been able to watch the last two. We do want these to kind of run like a series, and we had intended to follow along in the book Jailbreak, which is available at www.fromjeremiahtojesus.com. If you want to follow along, go there, click on books. It's there for free. In PDF form. If you want a hard copy, we can get you a hard copy, but it is there for free as for the purposes of this study. So what we were doing, we were following along, and we our second video sort of swerved into a discussion about the temple, which deviated away from where we were wanting to go a little bit. We were wanting to follow the book, like I said. So we're going to try to get back to the book today. And if you want to, if you've got the copy of the book from the website, then we're going to be starting. What we're going to do is read a little bit and then try to do some commentary on it and try to make our way through chapter 2 and maybe into chapter 3 today, just to see what happens. But if you want to read there, we'll start with the promises of Israel.
Okay, the promises of God to Israel. Yes, that beloved bedrock of every dispensational rapture preaching pastor's argument that proves that the chosen people have returned and are now back in the land. Remove every other leg under the dispensational chair and its supporters will still claim to stand due to the promises God recorded in His holy word. The promises, yes, they are unshakable. Now, before we start, I am not about to tell you the promises are somehow not in effect. The promises are definitely in effect. They have been in effect and will continue to be in effect. That is not the problem. The problem is that most people have never taken the time to understand what these promises say. Oh, sure, most can tell me of the promise of Abraham, known as the Abrahamic covenant, when God says He will bless those who bless Abraham and his seed, and He will curse those who curse Abraham and his seed. They also know of the promises to David, known as the Davidic covenant, that says, "But upon David and upon his seed and upon his house and upon this throne shall there be peace forever from the Lord." But who remembers the other set of promises given to Israel? You might ask yourself, why is it we only hear of the good promises, but no one ever wants to look at the bad promises? If God has two sets of promises, you must realize that He also needs two Israels upon which to bestow each set of promises. Hence, the church's dilemma. They cannot fathom this concept and how it could have taken place that there could be two Israels.
You know, this is one of the reasons I wrote this book, is to keep people on track. It's when they're trying to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ. There are so many different angles and avenues to prove this. Of course, in chapter 1, we looked at who is a Jew. He tells you flat out who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. And a good example of what happens is you end up deviating and going off into another topic because there's just so much. And this book is designed to keep you lined up. And I think what we're doing today is going to work a whole lot better. You know, these promises, people, you know, these pastors, they always fall back. No matter how bad you beat up the rapture, they always fall back to it based on the promises. It plainly blesses Israel. Israel is blessed without a doubt in the scriptures. There's no doubt about it, and so they cling to that. But that's as far as they go. They don't read the curses. You know, there are some devastating curses even all the way back. I think it's in the book of Deuteronomy or something. We'll read it here in a minute, but it's way back with Moses, and it's a devastating prophecy. It's a curse. And but the people who hate Israel, well, they'll run and talk about the curses, and the people who love Israel will run and talk about the blessings. And what we really need to talk about is both. They both have to be fulfilled, and that's what I was trying to get at here in this first segment of chapter 2. that there are two separate promises, and how are you going to bless somebody eternally and curse them eternally? You can't do that. You can't, unless you're God, and where you can separate the two, which is what he does with Israel. But if you've got a blessing that lasts for eternity, and you've got a curse that lasts for eternity, you can imagine, if you can go back in time into the days of David, even and even more recently, the days of before Christ arrived, the Jews were just in turmoil. Well, turmoil is maybe the wrong word, but they were they were trying to figure out, how is God going to do this? How is he going to? I mean, the scholars would look at it. How is he going to curse us and bless us? I mean, that's like between a rock and a hard place. You know, you can't bless and curse the same entity for eternity. You've got to choose one of the two. So it was a conundrum for. They couldn't figure out how God is going to. How's he going to pull this off? I mean, this is truly what Christ did was truly a miracle in more ways than we can even fathom. When you look at just at the promises, how it severed Israel, spiritual Israel, from physical Israel, and suddenly there's a blessing and a cursing. The curse falls upon physical Israel. The blessings fall upon spiritual Israel. It's really quite an amazing thing once you get your mind around it, and you realize what God actually did at the cross was just magnificent. So
pre-cross, before the cross is physical Israel.
Right.
Post-cross, spiritual Israel.
Spiritual, exactly right. And it's there's so many different. I keep, for some reason, the wedding, the mind's coming into my mind is the idea of maybe what we see in the book of Esther, where a king, the great king Ahasuerus, gets rid of his first wife, Vashti, I think her name is, and marries Esther. Vashti was disobedient, and and if you want to read the story, it's a short story. It's a wonderful story. But the ex-wife, if you will, is put away, and the new wife is brought in. And in many ways, that's what it was at the cross. I'm starting to go off track again. I don't want to do that, but just quickly, at the cross was the bride, the new bride, which is spiritual Israel, essentially taking the place. And you don't want to say taking the place because people get confused, but the old wife, the physical was put away, and the spiritual was brought in to replace it. So, but that's just one other angle. It's just there's so many. When you look at what actually happened at the cross, it's just fascinating.
Okay, to continue, you got two Israels. If you have not yet grasped this special way in which we must see Israel by now, I would suggest going back and reading the first chapter again. You must realize that there are now two Israels, both separate and distinct from the other, although they share the same name. The first Israel is spiritual, the chosen of God, and upon whom the good promises are fulfilled. The other Israel is physical and the recipient of all the curses. So why do we have the distinction in Israel from Israel? Well, that is only because most people have preconceived notions about who Israel is. They have convinced themselves that the country in the Middle East who took the name Israel is the real Israel. So when I say Israel, they automatically think of the nation in the Middle East. In fact, I cannot freely say the name Israel and have it refer to spiritual Israel, because everyone who hears it immediately thinks I'm talking about the physical people whose capital is recognized as Tel Aviv. Because of this, entire books have to be written just to explain it. Anyway, you can rest assured that God knows who the true Israel is, and it is the very same Israel that he has loved all along. Sure, he had to make a way where we could be redeemed from our sin and be formed into a chaste virgin, clean and spotless before God, but we are still cut from the same cloth as we saw with Abraham.
And that's another important point, that we see that we are from the seed of Abraham, but we are bound to Abraham through faith. So Abraham's faith came before the law. And the law is what everyone, all the Jews, they take all the Ten Commandments and follow the law and everything, and get back to our roots, and talk about the Hebrew roots movement, how it's all, we got to do the feast, we got to do the faith of Abraham came before all that.
Oh yeah.
The faith of Abraham came right at the very beginning when he had Isaac laying on the altar and was about to. He loved God so much that he was willing to let God said do it. He was just simply gonna do it. He didn't question. He obviously didn't like what God wanted him to do, but that wasn't the point. To Abraham, God said it. I've got to do it, and it was that faith that, fortunately, we're not called to lay our children on the altar and have to go through that same terrible. That must have just been excruciatingly terrible for Abraham just in the physical, just to think of that. What a challenge! How many of us would have failed that? Could we freely and honestly say we would have failed that challenge?
No.
It would have been a hard thing to do.
Nobody had done that.
Well, right, very, very few, and fortunately, Abraham was one of them. And so but we through faith, through our belief in Christ, and that's all we have to do. We believe, we have faith that Jesus accomplished these things. That links us, not physically through his physical seed, as far as his DNA, but it links us to Abraham, and that's so spiritual. That is so spiritual. It just takes me to you think about a portal, maybe Star Trek or something. You think about some kind of wormhole or something. The silliness that we believe out here in this science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
But the concept of it takes you right there, and it just pulls you into this spiritual place. There are just certain topics that do that to me, and that's one of them. That were linked through the faith of Abraham. And earlier in that segment, as you was reading, it is a shame, but that's how convoluted we've become. It's a shame that we have to make such a distinction. We can't just call ourselves Israel, because no one immediately, you would lose everyone. They wouldn't have any idea what they would try to think maybe your parents are Jewish, or your parents must be from Israel or something. They'd try to think you're trying to say something like that. Right. And you would instantly lose them. It's hard enough, just people listening now. I would dare say that most of them, and I hate to say this, I don't mean any disrespect, but a lot of them aren't following what we're saying. Our words say one thing, just like we say Israel. Well, me and you are talking about spiritual Israel, and they're thinking about a country over in the Middle East. And so it's hard enough just to make that initial connection to get people on the same page, much less having to, like I said, I felt like I needed to write all that in this book just to explain it, and I did. I could have wrote probably a whole book on the thing, on that one topic. But that's how messed up we are. When we say Israel, we're thinking of the Middle East.
Right.
So
it's hard for people to see the spiritual.
Mm-hmm. And that's the part of our message that is so it's hard for me to accept, is that what we teach, either it's heard, people either hear it,
or they don't.
My sheep hear my voice, is what Jesus said, or they don't. And no amount of pretty words, well written books, or anything they're not going to wake up.
Right. Well, Galatians 3 7 through 9 says, Know ye therefore they which are of faith, the same are the children of Abraham. And the scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the heathen through faith, preached before the gospel unto Abraham, saying, In thee shall all nations be blessed. So then they which be of faith are blessed with faithful Abraham.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
And you look, and we were talking about this earlier before we started recording, that the message has been there all along. I mean, this was there. King James, when he did the King James Bible, he read the same words. You know, go all the way back to wherever. You know, back to I don't know, pick a figure in the last 2,000 years. You know, and Napoleon, whoever. It was all along the same words. And then here we come up to the end of time, where we are today, and we read the words, and how many people miss it? Just miss it completely, not even close. You know, can't even understand who Israel is. Or can't even understand the concept that there would be two Israels, one cursed and one blessed. But just reading that right there, and to think that those type of words, so clearly written, right there in Galatians chapter 3, that you take it to any Baptist, Methodist church that you want to. Take it any church you want to take it to, and 99% of them are going to miss it.
Yeah, they got their spiritual blinders on.
Yeah, they're going to miss it.
Yeah. Well, you go on down a little bit. Well, the next verse, actually, verse 10, you're talking about the curses. It says, For as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse, for it is written, Cursed is every one that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them, but that no man is justified by the law in the sight of God. It is evident, for the just shall live by faith. And the law is not of faith, but the man that doeth them shall live in them.
Right. So right there it tells you who's blessed and who's cursed. Those that follow the law are cursed.
Right.
And those who... I mean, we all try to follow the law. We're certainly not teaching against the law. We're not teaching people not to follow the law. We should all try our best to follow the law. But our salvation is not in the law.
No, it's written in our hearts.
Right. And right there it is.
Yeah. Verse 13 goes on to say, Christ hath redeemed us from the curse of the law, being made a curse for us. For it is written, Cursed is every one that hangeth on a tree. That the blessing of Abraham might come on the Gentiles through Jesus Christ, that we might receive the promise of the Spirit through faith.
Right. Right. Become linked to Abraham through faith, and then that's where our salvation comes from, through Christ's work on the cross, because someone had to pay that price. And the blood of bulls and goats, as it says, were good for year upon year. It would last a year. But that we needed a sacrifice that would last throughout all eternity, and that's what we got with Christ. And that's why there will be no second fulfillment or a greater fulfillment of the Passover. The Passover was fulfilled in Jesus Christ. Yet another thing that He accomplished on the cross. So,
and continuing in the book, this next section is called the blessings. There is no doubt that God loved Israel and bestowed many wonderful blessings on her. If He had never issued any other decrees, then the case would not be called into question. However, with two distinct set of promises, we must realize a deeper meaning it is in play here. We would be wrong to simply toss aside the existence of either set of promises. However, this is what many people do today. They simply toss aside the existence of an entire set of promises that God made to Israel. Those who love physical Israel point to the blessings and ignore the curses. Those who are anti-Semitic hate Israel point to the curses and ignore the blessings. However, we would do well to explore both sets of promises instead of just one, and we should study them all the more strenuously to find the understanding. This way we are less apt to become confused. We will look at both sets in this chapter, so let's begin by reading the good, eternal promises to Israel. In Isaiah 9:7 we read, "Of the increase of his government, peace there shall be no end upon the throne of David, and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this."
Okay, let me let me stop you right here just for a second. This is a little bit longer section of the book, but think about this. We know the line of David technically ended. What can we say? Way back in when was it Jeconiah who lost the temple? No, it was Zedekiah, I think, was the final one. It doesn't matter. When Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple in 586 BC, he took the kings, and that was the end of them. There were no more kings of Israel. But this says, the line of David, there shall be no end. So how do you rectify that? But if you look at the line from Jesus and you trace it back, it absolutely traces back to the throne of David. And you pick up with Zedekiah, whoever it was, and you go down and you pick it up and you see that it leads, and it goes in Matthew, I think, and in Luke, both. Maybe not Luke, maybe it's Mark. I can't. But anyway, there's two genealogies, one from the priestly side and one from the kingly, and they lead to Jesus Christ. Now, how else can we show this to be fulfilled? On one hand, the throne of David has been, it's gone. There is no earthly throne of David even to this day. Even though Israel's back in the land, there's no throne there with a king sitting on it. And it says here, there shall be no end to it. So if it doesn't go spiritual, in other words, if Jesus doesn't fulfill this in the spirit, then how can you possibly say that it was fulfilled? You can't say. So you have to say Isaiah missed it. But we know that's not the case. So this shows without a doubt how incredible this spiritual turning of things upside down was, that this prophecy can only be fulfilled in the Spirit through Jesus Christ. And we also see that he fulfilled it, and that there has been no end. From the time that he fulfilled it, when he died on the cross and was resurrected, until this day, 2017, what is this, January 20 something, 29th or whatever, to this day, Christ rules on his throne, and there has been no end.
Right.
So it's just a glorious thing, I just wanted to point that out before we kept reading.
Another mention of this eternal promise is found in 2 Samuel 12 through 17. "And when thy days be fulfilled, and thou shalt sleep with thy fathers, I will set up thy seed after thee, which shall proceed out of thy bowels, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build an house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commit iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of men, and with the stripes of the children of men. But my mercy shall not depart away from him, as I took it from Saul, whom I put away before thee. And thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever before thee. Thy throne shall be established forever. According to all these words, and according to all the vision, so did Nathan speak unto David."
See, that's wonderful again. Just the idea that this throne shall not depart. This throne shall be forever. Again, there's only one way we can show that to be fulfilled, and you look down through Christianity. Christianity's took a downturn of late in the last few decades, but all through history, all for the last 2,000 years, Christianity has been the undisputed ruler of this world. I mean, Christianity has ruled, and just in many different terms. You know, you can say, well, the Catholics and all, but I mean, there was some form of Christianity at the head over the last 2,000 years, and that's just a tremendous fulfillment. And of course, here we see that His mercy shall not be taken away from us, and that's the glorious thing. That, you know, of course, Christ did not commit any iniquity, but us as His body, we can look to the things that we've done wrong, and we are His body. We are the body of Christ. We're the temple, and yet God's mercy doesn't depart from us. So that's a wonderful thing. I'm really, you know, obviously we're all blessed, and I'm extremely happy that we have these blessings that we have. I mean, goodness, just this right here. I mean, because if you remember Saul messed up. What did he do? He kept back a few sheep and 2 or 3 of the good-looking kingly girls there at the top. You know, I mean, he had Ahab there. He kept Ahab some sheep and 2 or 3 good-looking women. I think is about all he did. Mm-hmm. And what happened to him? He lost his throne. Just, I mean, he messed up one. He did everything God said except for one little thing, and he lost it all. Look at Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. They ate one little piece of fruit, and they lost it all. And thank goodness we have this blessing here that He's, even though we mess up, we're not going to lose everything.
While many will try to tell you this passage is speaking of Solomon, it is not. For this promise to be fulfilled, the kingdom must stand forever. So this is obviously speaking of Jesus. Jesus built a spiritual house, whereas Solomon built a physical one.
Right. Of course, going back to that, we see that Solomon was the son of David. Mm-hmm. So we think, so that's Solomon. See, Solomon, your son shall what's it say here? I will be his father, and he shall be my son. Mm-hmm. And it's through David. And so everyone thinks, David's son. Well, no, because Solomon actually, technically, after he dies, the kingdom, the kingship, the throne goes downhill really quickly. And of course we see in 586 BC it's destroyed altogether. So you see, even if you try to say it's Solomon, you see that comes to an end with Nebuchadnezzar when they put an end to the temple, the whole thing in Jerusalem. The whole is all flattened, destroyed. So,
since Jesus is the seed of both Abraham and David, this makes him the one upon whom the blessings are bestowed. Therefore, since as a Christian your identity is seen as that of being the body of Christ, you should understand that would place you in the position of also inheriting the blessings bestowed upon him as the chosen seed. Now, many rapture teachers try to say that Jesus will return one day and finally complete his work. They explain that he didn't quite finish the first time around because he couldn't get those pesky Jews to believe in him. This understanding couldn't be more wrong. Why would we say that Israel rejected him? Just because the majority of Israel rejected him, everyone assumes that he failed. Well, there was a small remnant that did believe, and they too were Israelites. They were counted for the seed as you are today if you also believe in him. The other Jews who didn't believe were simply cut off. They were the dead branches. Israel was preserved much in the same way you would trim back a diseased tree by cutting off its dead branches in order to preserve it. If you trim back a diseased tree until it only has 12 branches left, when it formerly had many thousands, does that mean the tree has rejected the treatment? No, the dead branches are picked up and burned, and the remaining branches are preserved, and the trees begin to recover. So Jesus is the husbandman who trims back the tree of Israel so it can grow again. The fact that he cut off many dead branches doesn't mean that the tree rejected him. He saved the tree. It didn't reject him.
I'm glad I decided to write and go into that a little bit more there, because so much of the kingdom of God, of what we understand in the gospel, can be understood simply by looking at things like this. How does a husbandman, how does he trim the tree? And in the Bible, I think it says he will dung the tree, and of course that means fertilize it. And we see that we were talking earlier about how the tree, even though it grows and it blossoms into what it's supposed to be at some point, its roots are still in the dirt. So we're still connected to the dirt. We're connected to this flesh as we live. We can understand so much of our relationship with Christ and our understanding of the gospel through just watching the natural processes of plants and whatnot growing, and we see the example of an acorn. You bury it in the ground. Until you bury it in the ground and it dies, the shell falls away and the life comes up out of it. Until you do that, it's going to be, you can set it right here on the shelf, and it'll stay an acorn for all eternity.
Right.
But if you put it in the ground and it dies, you bury it, then it springs up into life so much. And I can just go I can just run down these rabbit trails here, because it's just a glorious thing, wonderful. Shoo, it's everywhere you look too. There's just so much growing out of it. You can just go in so many different directions, and that's another one.
Mm-hmm. Okay, the next section here is called the curses. Now let's look at the curses. Wouldn't they also need to be fulfilled just as completely as the blessings? Well, of course they would. And now that we've seen examples of the blessings, let's read about a few of the curses. In Amos 8:2, we have a doozy. Then said the Lord unto me, the end is come upon my people of Israel. I will not again pass by them any more.
So see, look how permanent that is. The end is come. I will not again pass by them anymore. And this was a prophecy that, look, there's one here. There's going to be one last chance, and then after that, the end is come. This is what Amos was talking about. He was prophesying of Jesus Christ. He said that's going to be the end of it, and see, that's eternal. That's just as eternal as when he told David his throne will last forever. So you got a blessing on one hand, and you've got a curse on the other hand. I mean, which one is it?
Right.
So we have a dilemma here, and again, like I said, the ancient Jews were just mystified. But how is he gonna solve this unsolvable riddle? It's an impossible position. So that was very, the scholars spent many a day looking at it, and how was he going to do this? And when it happened, they just could not believe it. It was they couldn't accept it. It was beyond their ability to understand.
So now tell me how God fulfills both a blessing and a curse on the same entity when both sets of promises are eternal. Just how is God going to fulfill a promise that says, upon your throne shall be peace forever from the Lord, and also fulfill one that says your end has come and I will not pass by you anymore? This poses quite a dilemma for those in the church who desperately wish to see Israel as God's chosen people so they can effect an escape. After all, the Great Tribulation waits for this chosen group, and the church wants no part of that.
Well, ain't that the truth, And that's why this doctrine of rapture is so popular.
Oh, yeah.
Because they just want to get out. They just want to save their skins, save their whole
Right.
worthless carcass, as James calls it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the way to do it. Here's actually the curse we were talking about earlier in Deuteronomy. I'm getting ready to read it right now. So,
Okay. Anyway, let's continue. Here's another example of Israel's curses. We read from Deuteronomy 28:45 and 46. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till thou be destroyed, because thou hearkenedest not unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever.
See, now that was back in the days of Moses, and and it says plainly, this shall be upon you, be upon thee for a sign and a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So here we are, way before Amos, even way back when Moses was the one that wrote this, or he was. This was about his time, and I think he actually wrote that book as well, the book of Deuteronomy. In fact, I know he did. Yeah, that's one of the first 5 books, and Moses wrote those. Right. So here with Moses, we already have a prophecy saying it's over. You done messed up. It's over. No more chances. You goofed, and basically it's Saul. It's if you take Saul and David, Saul messes up. He eats the fruit, if you want to put it, you want to mix metaphors here with Adam and Eve. He does one little thing wrong. He keeps some good-looking Amalekite women, and the king, and some sheep. Mm-hmm. And he kills everybody else, just like God asked him to do. But he makes one little mistake, and he loses everything. Well, physical Israel made one, at the point that Moses was writing this down, at the point that this took place, they had murmured a little bit out in the wilderness. They had done some, they had messed up. But it wasn't to the extent that they had messed up when you get all the way down to Amos. They had done much worse things throughout the ages, but they had already lost it right here in the very beginning. They had already got the curse saying that this will be on them forever. And just like Saul, the blessing was removed, and it was placed on David, who David represents the spiritual. So you've got this, and David, David messed up. You remember David and Bathsheba. Mm-hmm. David messed up worse than Saul did, really, if you want to think about it. I mean, Solomon came to be because he killed this man so he could have his wife. And he deliberately did it. He murdered somebody, basically, is what he did. He didn't kill him with his own sword, but he sent him into a place where he knew he wasn't going to survive. And then he took his wife. So David messed up, but the blessing was not removed from David like it was from Saul. And we see the same thing with the physical. And you can look down, you can look all the way down through history. Look at Esau and Jacob. The blessing was removed from Esau and given to Jacob. Ishmael was actually Abraham's firstborn, but he wasn't born of the promise. He was born of doubt. He was the child of doubt, because Sarah and Abraham didn't think they were going to be able to have a son. So you see the same thing, right? Of the bondwoman, right? So again, you can see how, again, down another rabbit trail.
It's easy to do.
It is. It really is.
Again, I ask, how can Abraham's seed, who most assume to be the Jews, be eternally blessed and eternally cursed at the same time? Please take note that this curse is truly upon their seed forever. In today's dialectically driven society, it is an easy matter to sweep this under the rug. Lack of study blurs the facts even more, and the consensus finds that it must be that God simply changed his mind. Many will say, yes, he got mad at Israel, but later decided to give them yet another try. However, this ignores God's clearly stated declaration on the matter. Surely you can see how this doesn't sit well with the honest reader. Understanding how God reconciled both of these eternal promises is fundamental, and it is at the very heart of the gospel message. At the time of Christ, you can imagine many Jews, being familiar with the scriptures, must have been asking themselves this very same question: just how does God fulfill both set of promises? Unfortunately, for most of them, they completely missed how God ultimately pulled it off. Similarly, most Christians today are also missing it, but the answer is actually quite simple if you will only accept it. God had to have two Israels in order to be faithful to both sets of promises. A single entity cannot be eternally blessed and eternally cursed at the same time. God is a logical God, and this is not a logical position. Now, the church teaches that the two bodies are Israel, who will be returned to prominence during the final 7 years, and the Gentile church, who are not the chosen people, but are sitting in for those chosen people until God can finally get them to believe in Him. Spiritual bench warmers, if you will. However, no one ever bothers to give a cognate, scripturally based explanation of who gets dealt with the eternal curses. The reason is because there isn't one other than the one I am showing you in this book. The church ultimately prefers to act as if these curses don't even exist at all. It's the old head in the sand approach. If I can ignore them, maybe they will just go away. Well, they do exist, and they are still in full effect. What doesn't exist is the strange idea that we are now part of the Gentile church. This is another faulty notion that has grown to prominence among today's believers. It serves only to give further credence to the lie that the Jews are still God's chosen people. However, it is a subject worth looking into, and we'll do that in the next chapter.
So, of course, that dovetails into the chapter I titled "The Gentile Church." This idea of the church being a separate body. It's really kind of funny once you uncover it, because what they've done, they instead of separating spiritual Israel from physical Israel, that's how God set it up. That's where the world was turned upside down. But the church cannot see that. They can't see. It's almost like if you look at the recent political developments, you see that Obama, for instance, and this may not be exactly on the money, but it's close enough to make my point. You see Obama, the 8 years of Obama, you could make the case that the elite of the world, or those who are trying to steer us into this global one world government, and I hesitate to use the word global there. I should maybe the world, instead of, I'm not even convinced that the world is a globe, to be honest with you. There's a really strong case to be made that the earth is actually flat and stationary, and if you haven't looked into that, then maybe something you want to look into. Talking about turning your world upside down, that'll do it. But the world order that's trying to get a one world government set up through Obama, the case could be made that they're trying to divide us on race. They want to put the black people against the white people, you know, and the Jew against the whoever, the Arab or whatever. They wanted to divide us through race, and then to now you see Trump showing up, and now the division seems to be more. They're not wanting to divide us through race so much as they want it to divide us through people who believe in a one world. In other words, a one world government entity, if you want to. I'm trying to keep from saying the word global, but that way of, in other words, a one whole society, people who believe in just one government. And what Trump is bringing to the forefront now is nationalism. So we're seeing there's really no better word than global. So we see a global mindset being divided against a national. So we might be black and white and Asian or whatever, but if we're Americans, then we're all under that banner of a nationalistic way of looking at things. And then the separation comes, the global on the other side. And that, to me, is a very interesting point to be made when we look at what did the church do. Of course, the true separation is the one that says, hey, Israel is physical here, and then the cross happens, and it's turned upside down, and it's become a spiritual. Now it's become spiritual Israel. But what did the church do with that information? The church said, oh, no. We're the church, and we accepted Christ. So, in other words, they made their division between the church and Israel. So they took spiritual Israel and morphed it into a church instead of making it clear that no, Israel is the saved body here. Israel is the saved body. And now in my mind, I'm conjuring up or maybe conjure is the wrong word. That's a magical word, but the scriptures in Jeremiah about the potter's clay, when he took the clay and he didn't set the vessel up on the shelf and get a new lump of clay. He made a new vessel out of that same lump of clay. Rather than acknowledging that, the church just pretty much just said, no, we're taking the place of Israel. And that's where you get replacement theology and that kind of stuff, where the church replaces Israel. And in a sense, that happens because spiritual Israel replaces physical Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But when they take it and they say, no, it's the church, it skews us away from the truth, and we end up out in the wilderness lost. But I just thought it was interesting how in the political world today we see they try to make divisions, and how that division seems to be changing from that to more of a nationalistic America standing as one nation versus maybe, France or whoever is another nation, and England's a nation, and some nations get along and some nations don't get along. That we're going more to it's like what happened at World War II when Hitler was actually he was building a nationalism, a German nationalism, a German national socialism. And of course, on the other side of the coin was the globalist. In Russia, you had the more one world minded people who wanted to do away with nations. And of course, we had World War II. And I'm not trying to say that Trump is Hitler. He's not. Trump is not a socialist. Trump is a capitalist. So there's a lot of differences there, and I wouldn't try to make that comparison in this vein of thought. But you see the same nationalism building. And of course, here where we are in the book, we see a division as well, and we've got it wrong again. Most people are going to miss this. They're going to see the division as Israel and the church, and they're going to be adamant about that. They're going to say, no, Israel rejected Christ, so now we have the church. They're going to make a real strong case for that. Yeah. And again, they're just showing that they're missing. They're trying to make it physical instead of trying to make it spiritual. They want to see the DNA of the guy that's supposed to be an Israeli, an Israelite, and the guy in the church. The church are like the bench warmers. Okay, well, God's going to deal with us until a certain point, until the time of the Gentiles is fulfilled, and then we're going to be taken to heaven, and then He's going to deal with His real chosen people. The real chosen. No, that's not it, because that completely ignores the important part of what Christ did on the cross.
That's making it of none effect, giving away their birthright right there.
Absolutely, that's just, it's giving the birthright away, like you just said. Here but what did Esau do?
He gave his birthright away for a bowl of soup.
Yeah, just like it wasn't nothing. And at least, I make the joke, I think I made this in one of the last episodes, at least he got a bowl of soup for his birthright. Yeah. What are we getting? When we give our birthright back to the physical Jews, we're getting nothing but a big old bunch of lies. Make a covenant with death, and with lies we've made our refuge, I believe it says in Isaiah, and that's what we've done. We've made lies our refuge, and Esau got to enjoy his soup, and we don't even get that much. So
No.
when it falls on us, it's going to be just complete devastation.
Well, the people in the church, I mean, there's so many people sitting in these pews nowadays. I mean, how can they all, you know, every one of them is not saved. So, doesn't make any sense. Replacement theology.
When you hear what's being taught, and then you look at the people sitting there listening to what's being taught, and they don't even question it. They don't even, what we read in Galatians earlier. It's flat out tells you that you're of the faith. You're of Abraham through faith.
Right.
And no one ever reads that verse and then has a question. Hey, Pastor, what does this mean? What does this mean? If you look at it, it's really written almost in definitely in every book of the Bible. You can find references, if not a prophecy, then a fulfillment of a prophecy, flat out statements made by Peter, made by Paul, made by all.
Yeah.
I dare say you could be hard pressed to go through any book in the Bible and not find a declarative statement that makes the case that we are now of what Jesus would do, either would do on the cross in the future or did do in the past, depending on where you read from, of course.
Right. Here in Romans 6, or Romans 9, verse 6, it says, not as though the word of God hath taken none effect, for they are not all Israel, which are of Israel.
Right. That right there. This right. They're not all of Israel, which are of Israel. Now, how else can that make sense?
Well,
not all Israel is Israel.
People will be like, well, I guess some Muslims have moved over in Israel, and I guess that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, right. It must have been Ishmael's seed, and yeah, right.
But then it goes on and says, neither, because they are the seed of Abraham, are they all children, but in Isaac shall thy seed be called. That is, they which are the children of the flesh, these are not the children of God, but the children of the promise are counted for the seed. For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come, and Sarah shall have a son. And not only this, but when Rebekah also had conceived by one, even by our father Isaac, for the children being not yet born, neither having done any good or evil, that the purpose of God according to election might stand, not of works, but of him that calleth. It was said unto her, the elder shall serve the younger, as it is written, Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated. Esau have I hated. What shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? God forbid.
Well, let me stop you right there, because let me ask you a simple question. Why did God hate Esau?
Because he gave his birthright away.
Because he gave his birthright away, like it wasn't. He took something that was undescribable in value, and he gave it away like it wasn't worth anything, and that's why God hated. So, and then in comparison, then we say, what does God think about what church members today are doing? They're giving their birthright away. They don't even realize they're doing it because they're not interested. They're not interested enough to even look into the subject. They read those words that you just read. Paul couldn't have made it any clearer. I mean, those words you read were just words of as pure as silver, tried in the furnace 7 times, like it says in the Proverbs, I believe it is. And crystal clear. And it doesn't even raise a question in their mind. They don't care anymore. They're just like Esau, patting his belly, coming in from a hunt. He's tired. He's hungry. Here's Jacob with a good bowl of porridge over here, and he's going to throw it all away to feed his belly, because that's all he was interested in. He wasn't interested in understanding the intricacies of what Jacob was wanting, the intricacies of what his birthright meant. He just going to give it away for a bowl of soup, and hand me the remote control. Let me, I want to see if, my show's on,
Yeah.
Maybe The Walking Dead's on. Let's watch The Walking Dead.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's what's interesting to them.
American
Not,
Idol.
yeah, American Idol or something. Not what the scriptures say. And they sit in these pews and they hear these teachings, and nothing is stirred in their soul.
It's amazing.
I see now we're just about out of time for this hour. Maybe we should end it here, and we'll have a nice little ending.
All right.
Hopefully do enough, and it come out good too. We're on chapter 3 now. We'll go into the church, and during the next one.
Yeah.
Good deal. All right.
Good, huh?
All right.